She's one of our family. She's always at every event that we have. Carol Jean Jordan is there supporting us, and we appreciate her. Thank you, Carol. I want to give thanks to those that helped, put this together. We have the John Birch Society, Michael Saga, Miss Michael. Michael's right there. And then we have the Godfather. Where's the Godfather? There he goes. There has to George with all his people. So happy George. And then we have another organization, Grassroots for America. They're the ones also sponsoring this event. And I just want to thank each and every one of you guys for being here. And I just want to ask a question. How many of you were in the Capitol in January 6th? Raise your hand. How many of you believe that the 2020 election was stolen? Raise your hand. Amen. So we're on the same page. Because a lot of people, they talk about January 6th, but then they forget about why January 6th happened, right? We went to fight for a constitutional right to make our voices heard, like Trump said, and they forget about that. They just thought that we went to January 6th just to go in there and invade the Capitol, which was a lie, a big one, right? So I always tell people that, when you talk about J6, that's the reason why we all went to protest, because they stole the election. And it's coming out. It's sooner or later before Trump gets out of the White House, is coming out. And I thank God that he pardoned each and every one of them, because he did say that he was going to do that. And the first thing he did was pardon all of those 6 years in the we all patriots, and the J6 was the greatest political injustice in our lifetime. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about that. Our grandkids are going to be talking about that. Even our great grandkids are going to be talking about that. And they're going to be telling me, Grandma, I said, I was at the Capitol, but the reason why I didn't go to the Capitol was because I had frostbite and I couldn't even walk. I felt that there was a coldest day on earth. That day, I went to J6 and I said, let's go. And I was walking, but then I couldn't walk no more. But I have a lot of friends that were there, and I know what happened. It was amazing. It was a beautiful experience, and because of that experience, these guys here, they were just prosecuted for that, but it's all going to come out, so we thank God for that. Also, I want to let you guys know, we have a couple of people in the house. We have Dr. Phil. He's back there, and I invited him. He is a doctor that's here, and he's going to talk a few minutes about, what he has going with PTSD, and, share it. It's good for the guys. And I also like to let you guys know about the Cinco de Mayo party that we're having. It's a fiesta, and we're going to have it in Ontario. And it's going to be at the Polish American, and it's going to be May 2nd. So if you guys haven't bought your tickets, do so, because it's getting filled, and I don't want to turn anybody down, but it's going to be a big event. I mean, I spoke to Enrique yesterday. He goes, oh my God, I had so many people calling me about that event. So it's going to get packed. So I'd like you guys to go and see Steve or Susan or Nora back and get your tickets before you guys leave. Okay, thank you guys. I'm going to introduce right now. I'm going to introduce George. Well, first of all, where's Lamar? Lamar is Lamar, can you come up? So Lamar is the chair of the Republican Executive of the River County, and she's going to speak for a few minutes.
Sandra is doing a great job here, and I'm so proud of our J6ers here. I was there, Sandra was there, and it could have been us. And like the Bible says, remember those who were in chains as if you're in chains with them. And so we did pray for you guys, and we did send our money when we could, and together, Gateway Pundit did a good job. so much for being here, and God bless you and your families.
And then I am going to have George, the Godfather, come up and introduce the J6ers.
Yeah, how you doing, everybody? My name is George Colon, the National President for Born to Rise for 45. I'm also a World Trade Center survivor, and I was there January 6th also. Now, everybody knows President Trump has won. The greatest thing that happened, he did lose 2020. So it's all the say that was the best thing that happened to him, so he could plan for 4 years to do exactly what he's doing today. So I think everybody's happy with that. The other thing I'd like to bring up about the J6s. Now, they all received, well, some of them received full pardon. There's still some of them are waiting to be completely done. But just because the pardon happened doesn't mean it's over for you. They can't get a job. They can't get loans. They're losing their homes. And this is why we bring attention to all this that's happening. So I'm not going to introduce all of them. I'll just introduce a brother I know for a long time. And don't talk about the J6 because it's not my thing to do, take it away from Kelly Banks. And plus he's taller than me, so. Every time I stand next to him, it's like I stand in a hole. But you have to understand what they're going through. Besides the PTSD, and they do have the PTSD. Besides, a lot of them were veterans, also proud ones. That all got caught up. There was 14 on the list, which were oath keepers, which were majority veterans and police officers. And also the Proud Boys was the same amount of mix. So you have to understand they did do a sacrifice, as we all did at January 6th, but they got tortured more. And they were a thing called Beasley, which they were transplanted from jail. Once they got comfortable with the jail, they moved them to another jail, and then another jail, and then another jail. The way they got their food, a lot of it was tainted. The water was tainted, and the food, and they had to have at least 2,000 calories a day, because they were given them a big piece of cake, so they could pass the quota for the healthy people in the jail. But what happened is, they used to pass the food to a little door, and they would push it through, so if you catch it, you catch it, it's not on the open floor. So this is how they were treated. And Kelly Vance will tell you more about it because of what they went through. But again, the pardon that a lot of them got is not what you think it is. And whatever fund or money you donate, which is all legit, it's all done on the record, and it'll be distributed. There are a lot of organizations that collect the money for January 6th, but the day again. And this is an open fact. So I want to introduce Kelly Vance. I know his brother over there. Sit down, too tall. Anyway, I know Kelly a long time, and the last time I saw him before 2 months ago was on the steps of January 6th. And it was like 40 years since I saw him back again, which I was very proud to be with. But we also escorted prisoners that were coming out of jail and met them at the location. So we know Antifa was harassing them and stuff like that. So it was our responsibility to meet them and make sure that everything was up and up. And they constantly attacked them. So it hasn't been one of the J6s, a lot of them get mail, hate mail, almost every week and every day about the insurrection that they did, which there's no such insurrection. No cops got killed there. The only one that died, that was killed, was Extra Guy. And before, I forget that, but they'll tell you the names. I don't think it's quick away. So I appreciate everybody coming. Please give your undivided attention to the J6 because it's a real special day. All right, thank you very much. God bless everybody. 2025, 28, and beyond. And if you want to make the people that go to all these protests, if you show up, when you leave, you notify them, tell them Trump is still your president, which they stop doing. It's suicide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Banks. I'm the leader of the Oath Keepers of Florida. I got sentenced to 12 years for seditious conspiracy, and I am one of the people that do not get a pardon. I am currently commuted. I have no reason to believe that was being used for a different reason, but we will go into that later on in the program. What we're trying to do is bring attention to what's going on and what has happened with the January 6th community. So we're trying to go together with Grassroots of America, the John Birch Society, and Rider 45. We're putting a little tour on. We're going around the state, and people that are local to the area are going to be coming in and talking at these events. So the primary purpose is just bring attention to what's happened, what's currently happening, and what's going to happen. So we just want to spend a little bit of time with each person, and we kind of got an order that we're going to go in, just so you're not hearing the same story over and over again, because a lot of our stories are exactly the same. So we try to just make sure everybody's talking about their own little thing. And then at the end, we'll open it up and we'll have a little question and answer session. So if you have a question or anything, we'll be more than happy to take an answer as well. One of the hardest things about the entire process that we went through, and believe me, it was a process, it was pre-planned, it was pre-done, and they knew what they were doing when they started it. The hardest part about it was the emotional toll that it took on not only us, but also our families. A lot of people lost their families. A lot of wives left their husband, didn't stand by their side, they couldn't take it. And I understand it because it is a hard, hard thing to go through. You have to deal with 4 years with your primary income when they're gone. And you're cashing out 401ks, and you're cashing out retirement accounts, you're selling properties just to keep your bills paid. It cost me over $1.5 million in the last 4 years. Okay? And I'm telling you, I'm not the only one that's had that kind of financial hit. So when you come back out and you're like, okay, I'm free, now what? You can't get a job, can't get hired, all those things. Every time you go to get hired by somebody, I've been all the way through the process, and then right at the last second, they're like, our HR department won't do it. They're afraid we're going to get protesters here. We can't hire you. So as much as we think that everything's fixed, it's really not. And it all started with the emotional toll that it took on our families and the things that our family had to go through. So what I'm going to do right now is bring up Angel Harrelson. Angel's going to talk to you guys first about some of the things she had to go through just to keep things going at home while this entire process started. Her husband, Kenny, is also an oath keeper. He was arrested about 2-3 weeks after me.
March 10th.
3 weeks, yeah. About 3 weeks after I was. And she's done a lot, and she's pulled right through it. So here she is, Angel Harrison.
Hi everyone. As y'all know, my husband and him was both at J6, and ever since he got arrested on March 10th, 2021, he hasn't been home until April of last year. April 20th is when he was able to come home. Well, my fight began the following week because I got fired from a job. I was told that I was a high-risk employee. I looked for another job. Got fired from that job before I even started. I was a high-risk employee. The third time was the last time I was in the trouble because I got fed up. I got fired from that one too, 2 days later. As soon as they found out who I was and who my husband was. Well, I took the initiative and I started making my own patches and designing my own shirts, using drawings on shirts. I was doing whatever I could to make ends meet, just until he comes home because they took his VA benefits at that time. I had to fight his VA benefits times in 4 years. I finally got it, the fourth time was about a year and a half ago, and I got it put in my name. His VA benefits get sent to me on a check. So from now on, I have to go and cash his VA benefits to us to pay the bills and all that stuff. But while I was fighting that 4 times, I ended up started doing, as y'all can see on that table right there, I brought her hats, I brought her patches, I brought some with me. Patches at $10 each. The hats, I got them on sale right now for $20 each. So you have to go and take out pick. I also have a website that's called angelspatriotbattle.org. And I have business cards over there as well. But this other struggle that I've had was, it wasn't just the income. It was one of our kids, he went into the military. And this will probably upset most of y'all here. He was being bullied in boot camp very badly because, of course, his dad is retired Army Sergeant Kenneth Harrelson. During that time, he was able to pass boot camp. It took over 8 years for him to be able to pass that because they kept moving him. Well, he passed the boot camp. He went through AIT. He passed AIT. As soon as he got to his station in California, he ended up getting his life threatened. They told him there's no cameras on the stairwell, that you don't know what's going to happen to you. And we had to deal with that. And come to find out, even his commanding officer was threatening him. I was on the phone with them, and they thought they could call me and give me an attitude. I told them, I said, I don't know who you think you're talking to. I said, but I'm a wife of a retired Army Sergeant. I said, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not your soldier, sir. So they ended up letting him come home. They used the excuse it was a medical honorable discharge. That boy was only in the Army for 2.5 years. We had to deal with that. He come home, he was stressed, he worried about his daddy. Well, after dealing with that, we got threats. I was getting threats through mail ever since he was arrested. I still get them to this day. I've brought all of them with me if y'all want to look at them. This is what the wives receive at home. A lot of the family members receive these at home directly to our address, where our kids reside, where our spouses reside. And this is another part that separates us from our loved one. It causes problems because he's afraid they're going to get hurt. I was threatened. I had sexual abuse threatened on me in one of the parties with the police. But I didn't let it get me down, and I don't think no other family member should let it get them down. I had God on my side, I had faith, and I kept my hope up. But as of right now, I thank God for everything, and my husband, and my family. So thank y'all for listening to me.
Thank you, Angel. Yeah, you can jump over there and grab hands and everything. I've got books over here as well. I'll sign anything that you like. We'll get that done. Next, we're going to bring up Olivia Pollock. She's going to talk about the arrest process that we all went through.
Like all the other January 6th families, our story started that day, and we were at the Capitol. We were on the west side where a lot of the action happened, and so we went through the day, as everybody else came home, not expecting to turn on the news that day and find out that we were terrorists. Insurrectionists, terrorists, a threat to our country. Slowly, as the year progressed, my brother, I think it was a month, or maybe a couple weeks, he ended up on the FBI's most wanted list, as a lot of the people here. And so we kind of were expecting the FBI to knock on our door every day. And as it went on about, I tiny house out there that he was living in, so we had driven through there to get around his house. I was living in the van behind my parents' property, and I look out the window, and there's they have armed SWAT all the way around, lasers pointed at the van. I hear boom, 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 boom again. Jonathan Olivia Pollard, come out, you're wanted for your arrest. And wow. I was like, they could have, we knew they were following us. We've seen, they're very obvious. You can tell when somebody's following the FBI are very good at their job. But they knew our words. They could have arrested me quietly, taken me to jail, no problem. But they had to make a show. And all of our neighbors saw, they were all watching out there, in their pajamas out their door, had to hear everything that goes on. They had no idea, what in the world, we go to church on Sunday, we come home, go to work, real quiet, never had any problem with the law, and yet they treated us like we think we were running a game or something out of our house. But so they surrounded our house, followed our name on the loudspeaker, and we come out, so they surround me, and I'm like, well, they want me, so maybe I can stall a little bit, give my family a little bit of time to kind of get dressed and stuff. So I'm like, I want to see a warrant for one. You come out and say you have a warrant for my arrest. I want to see a warrant. So you're like, no, get out of here, step out of the people, step out of the people. We're going to sit in the dogs. They have the SWAT dogs and everything. And I'm like, no, I want to see. I have a right to see it. You need to have a warrant if you're going to come knock on our door. And they're like, no, step out of the people, step out of the people. I'm like, I don't want to sit in the dog in here. I was like, I want to see a warrant. So they stalled. Next thing I know, they fired the flashbangs under the van. They go off, hit the van door, and I'm like, I want to see a warrant. And so finally, they wave a piece of paper in the air. I'm like, okay, let's get out. I don't know if there's a warrant or not. They never actually told me. Handcuffed me, take me to the front. They have all my family handcuffed against the doors of the police vehicles. A lot of people don't know they have to have, the FBI has to have permission from your local sheriff to come on to your property or in their jurisdiction. And so everybody thinks Grady Judd's all that. He's not. He let the FBI come in with many you. They never had a problem with us before. They could have quietly questioned us or whatever. But he let them on property. And they have, local police with them. And so all my family, my mom, my dad just didn't have a shirt on, just in this boxers up against the thing, woke them out of their sleep. My mom had to be on the front, handcuffed against the cars, and they take me around, question me, and my dad said, they're like, is anybody else on the property? Is anybody else on the property? I'm like, I was like, my sister lives on the, they had just sold their house and they were living in an RV in back, and they had 3 little girls. One was less than a year old, and then the oldest was 4. And I was like, they're living in the back. I was like, but please don't go back. This is my dad's house. Please do not go back there with those grenades. There are little babies in there. They will come out. You would just tell them to come out. They'll come out. They go in there. Next thing we know, boom, 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 through the such an example of us, and that's how they did it. And that was one of the grades, we ended up having 2 on our particular situation, which I'll have Brian share a little bit of that. But that's the thing, we can't live our life in fear. And yes, you may go through and have a time when you have to stand on principle. And I believe our forefathers did that. They gave their lives, their horses, and their sacred honor for us and for the next generation. And that's what we got to do sometimes. And yeah, you may have consequences, and we spent 13 months in jail because of it. And our 4 years of the whole process. And like Angel said, our families went through a lot too. The same, emotional turmoil and everything, but it's worth it. Because if we don't stand for something, we fall for everything. And if we don't stand up for the next generation, what will our kids have to deal with coming up? And through this whole thing, I've learned so much. And spending time in, the time that I did spend in jail, I saw how corrupt it has been. It hasn't just started. And the corruption of the BOP and the corruption of the jail system and the money racket that it is has been going on for a long time. And we are just getting light of it because we're just getting thrown into it. And that's the thing, like I was ashamed. I've been, years before in prison ministry, we go into the jail or the prison mall, the women's prison. And I had no idea what those girls had to go through and what those girls were dealing with their trials, with their defense of having to fight for a public defender or whatever they were having to deal with, the racket that it is, every single thing, just the bare necessities of something to clean your cell, toilet paper, soap, just the basic necessities, human life. You have to fight tooth and nail just to get it. We went, I think it was almost 2 months without cleaner in our unit. There's almost 40 women that were in there, and they would not bring disinfectant in. They kept giving us degreaser to clean the showers and clean the toilets and everything. We're sharing toilets and everything. Just that kind of stuff is sick, and that's just the minimum, cleaning supplies, let alone the lives that are just getting, thrown away, thrown into these women are having to have babies in jail because they're a threat to waiting on pre-trial, haven't even been sentenced yet, pre-trial, and they had to have their children in jail and taken away from them, and got a 1-hour visit every week, maybe, if the visits weren't canceled, to see their newborns, and just stuff like that. Like, I had no idea, but now we know, and I'm hoping through this, like, God's given us a voice to speak for the ones who can't speak. I left a lot of girls that I became friends with in there, in DC. And they said when I left, they were like, don't forget about us. We're still going to be going through this. And, I thank God for Donald Trump and giving us the part and giving us our lives back. And, but there's a lot of people that are still going to go through this broken justice system. And I'm praying we got 4 years to hopefully change it so that January 6th, what happened to us will never happen to anybody else, or at least not in our lifetime. And so don't. I guess all I have to say is don't grow quiet and complacent. I believe that's why we got into the place that we are now.
Right.
And that's how we have to do it. So don't. We may have a little 4-year respite. But that's when we need to work the hardest to get hopefully something in place so that the next 4 years are good. And then our children have the next 4 years and so on. And we fight and hopefully, like Trump said, fight, because that's what we have to do. We do have to fight and let it be in our days so our children don't have to deal with it. But I just, thank you for the opportunity to let us share our stories and for Kelly for setting this up. Really appreciate it.
A lot of people talk about the guys that were in DC and all how bad it prison, it was a lot better for us because the inmates there respected us for what we did. But in the female prisons, they were not respected. My wife went to prison for over a year, and she had to deal with it. And the stories there are a lot worse in prison than they were for us in prison. I mean, C2B, when we were in D.C., that was one thing, but the actual prisons were worse, so let me know what you want to do. Right? Now we're going to bring up my brother John. He's got the best story of J6, I think. We knew about him while we were in D.C., because we kind of admired what he was doing. So I've been waiting to hear this story for 4 years.
No, I appreciate that. I just thank y'all so much for just taking the time to come out and get together, because that's what America's all about. This is our, this is what we're meant to do. As American citizens, we have to come together, stand beside each other, realize what's going on in our country, and be vigilant, be active, come together at meetings like this, and be able to do something in the community. But in January 6th, I won't get into a lot of it, but the beginning, COVID was really one of the biggest eye-openers of just how bold the government started getting. They weren't being secret anymore. They were showing their true colors and just telling you, what you can do in your own home, turning families against each other out of fear, and saying, you're not allowed to go to church anymore, or you're safe. We are now your God, and we will tell you what you can and can't do. And we were those that always, just every time we could bug the system, we would. But we hated COVID, because it opened so many eyes of what your friends would do today. People that, would preach one thing, and then as soon as they were threatened with the fact that, you may be sick, you may get this disease or something, you turn on each other. And you saw people falling for their tricks. And it was very sad, but it opened a lot of eyes. And when 2020 came around, and we saw what they did with the election and just the lies that they were portraying and tried to steal our vote, it was the final straw. And, we said we have to go up there. So we had a whole church van, 2 vans full. We went up there, and we wanted to make our voices known. We went to stand peacefully with Donald Trump and with the rest of America. We're like, it's much bigger than Donald Trump. This could be the fall of America. If we don't stand now, then we're done. And so we were excited. We went up there, and we saw the people. And it was such a beautiful sight to see that many Americans stand up at that time together. And we went to the Capitol in front, and this is amazing. We're peacefully protesting. All of a sudden, pepper spray. We get covered in pepper spray and tear gas, and they just hit us with everything all of a sudden. And I was right there at a point right there where Ashley Babbitt died, and she died right frozen boiling. She had died right beside me. It was a very chaotic scene. It was wild going on there, and but we were proud to be there. And when we got back to the hotel, we just like Olivia said, we turned on the news and it was, you're now a terrorist. You're now a threat to America. You're like, wow, look how fast it's spun, and look how fast it changed what really happened there. So we saw it in COVID. We saw what they could do with the media, but then people started buying into it. Like all of a sudden, the media is truthful now, and good patriotic men and women that we hung out with all the time. We're like, well, y'all messed up. That was wrong. Y'all should have never been out there. They turned on us too, and it was so sad to hear so many families turning on each other and co-workers, just everybody pitted against each other. And that's exactly what they wanted. But luckily, we had a very strong family, very, very patriotic, and we stood together. And when we heard that the FBI put me on a most wanted list, we fought this far, I'm not going to go down easy. And so we got a lot of military buddies and police officer buddies that kind of told us how to find them. And so we knew what to do. And so as soon as they went to my boss, they tried to catch me at work or get information FBI's here. But they wanted me to help turn you in. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just letting you know. And being taught and watching the sex charge and different things like that. So I'm like, all right, I'll catch y'all later. And I went dark. Phone out the window. And, you know, it was a good, solid 3 years, you know, on the run. And it was such an amazing time. You know, people would say, well, how could you sleep? How could you, go through those 3 years and not just be overwhelmed with anxiety, worrying about every different camera that's out there, and worrying about who may turn you in, and this and that. And but I knew if we were right for what we did that day, and I wasn't ashamed of it. And I knew that I had a clear conscience of what we stood for, and it was right. And we had prayed together afterwards, and we were like, Lord, if it's your will for me to turn myself in, I will do it. Just put that on my heart that I'll turn myself in if I'm wrong in what I'm standing for. And I never had a guilty conscience. I had a clear conscience the entire time. I slept like a baby every single night. I slept in the woods a couple nights. I was in a swamp for a week, but I still slept good. I mean, the swamp was rough as a student, but it was good. I mean, there's people that we didn't really know about, hear about the story and contact us in person and different things. Like, hey, do come up here and work on my ranch, or do come out here and work on my hunting cabin. And because growing up, we kind of learned how to do everything with work and welding and concrete and everything. So I could do a lot of different jobs. People would open up their houses for different things and let me work there and stay for free. And it just worked out. And so I would stay in some places a couple months and then go to another place. And I was all over the country and met so many wonderful people. And people would say the same thing. I just felt like God wanted me to open my house up to you. So I did. And their families would be like, no, this is too dangerous. There's too much risk in this. Don't do it. And they would say, no, there's something here. We have to stand for something. And this is bigger than just us. And so they were rallying beside us. And I went 2 years by myself. There was almost 1 year I just stayed quiet. I mean, almost completely by myself for months and months. And being alone, you got a lot of time with just your thoughts, with your mind. Those guys that spend solid every time they can attest to that. You have to learn to control your mind. If you're not at peace with what you're doing, it will torment you. It will drive you crazy. But it was such a wonderful time just studying and getting along and realizing, what I truly stood for and who I was as a man, and just learning all those different things that came out of that, and just learning so many different family members, I guess, and new family members that came beside us. We had guys we knew that were in the electric company that would tell us whenever the FBI would set up new cameras on our houses and different things. They would set up cameras, 800 yards off. I mean, so far you couldn't tell, but they're like, hey, we just set up another camera at your house. The FBI's watching this door, this place, and then, we never went back to the house, but we knew where they were watching. And just people started coming beside us. But it was also, you learned where people actually stood. Once there was consequences to your beliefs, you no longer believe it anymore. Once there's actually a threat to what you believe in, you no longer believe it. And it was sad because there's a lot of people out there like that. You only believe it so far until there's actually consequence. And but it was such an amazing time. Just seeing so many countrymen come together and stand beside you. And then 3 years go by, 2 years go by, and then my sister and my buddy Joseph Hutchison, they were about to go to trial. My sister got caught, and he got caught at the same time. They were about to go to trial, and they were like, "Well, we're going to fight it too, fight it all the way." And so they were want to resolve, and we had this plan. It was a wonderful plan. We had our code written out, and we could talk, and we were able to escape again, and so Lydia, my buddy Hutchison, we were on the run together, and it's kind of the same thing. We did a lot of traveling, did a lot of going back and forth. There were so many times they were so close, but yet, we always made it just a little bit, and it was funny. There's one time we went out to eat, and we don't ever do it. It was when I was by myself. My mom just did so long. I just like to go out to eat. You don't go into towns. There's so many families, and there's just so many things that can go wrong. You don't go out to eat, and so anyways, I decided, let's go out to eat. I'll wear my disguise. I'll look incognito. We'll go to a mom and pop store where they don't have expensive games. And so I go in there. I'm sitting down, and the whole police force walks in and sits there beside us. You got it, okay. And so I'm just acting like, hey, I'm just a normal guy. Don't worry about me. And but it's funny. There's so many times just like that. But they have no clue how close they were. But the Lord kept us safe. I know that without a doubt. But it was amazing. We stayed in as long as we could. When it was time to go to jail, they found us. And we had some people turn us in for the bounty because I had $15,000 on my head for the first year. The first year they couldn't find me, they put $50,000 on me. And then the second year they couldn't find me, they put $30,000. And the second year goes by, they fired the entire FBI team that was on my case and rehired a whole new team and restarted the whole thing. And that was our whole purpose of it. We're like, if we can get enough of them fighting us, then maybe they'll leave some others alone and they can not have to go through this deal. But we had gained a good run, and I told the FBI guy once they finally caught us, they hit us hard. When they finally found us, we got this ranch, and they come in, we're sleeping in there, it sounded like a hurricane, all of a sudden on top of our house, and they have that Apache helicopter sitting on top of our house. I mean, big old spotlight. They surrounded that thing. I mean, it was like that. All of a sudden, I look out the window, and there's Bearcats surrounding the thing. It looked like they had 50 guys out there, just, I mean, full camos, lasers everywhere. I'm like, man, they didn't spare no expense on this one. And they came out hot and heavy on the second time. But it was just that peace came back. And the scriptures talk about that peace that passes all understanding. It doesn't make sense. And it can't make sense to someone who doesn't know that peace that God gives. When you're standing for something righteous, when you're standing for something that's right, whether God-given rights that our Constitution is based on. It's not rights that man can take away. It's right. And so when we went through all this, we knew that it was a righteous cause to stand for. And so it was, when they came and got us, it was just that peace that came back like it did so many times throughout my whole journey. And it was just, all right, your time's up. Now it's time to go to jail and meet some more people. And it was just, I yelled across the room as Joey and Lydia were in the same house. I'm like, all right, the Lord's got something else planned for us. We're going to jail now. And it was just, you weren't scared ever. You never had fear of getting caught. You never had fear of the consequences. You were willing to die for the cause. And to do something like that, you have to believe in it. It can't be out of fear. It can't be out of just, I have to save myself. There has to be a pure cause in it. Because that's what, so many people try to go on and run different things. They get lonely and they turn themselves back in, or they just couldn't do it. And it was, you had to believe it. You had to believe it was a righteous cause. And you had to have that peace that only God gives you. There was times it would get long. It would get so long. And you just wish, just talk to somebody. I talked to my fridge. There's a cabin I stayed out for a long time. I talked to the refrigerator a lot. There's me here. But it was such an experience. And meeting so many good guys out in jail there. And then while I was on the run, I was hearing about these guys, you know, some of the first ones that went to jail and what they were suffering through. And then it was a fight. There were so many people going through so many separate fights in city life. And you were just waiting for the American people to rally beside each other and say, no, stop hunting us now. And it never really happened. But you slowly started seeing people wake up to what was really going on. And my family, like they said, their family was so much. I felt like it was harder for my family than it was for me. Because my dad, they would come to my dad just constantly, trying to make him crazy. And they would call my dad up. They called my dad one time. They're like, hey, we need you to come ID a body. I think it's your son. And he's dead. He's dead here. We need you to ID him. And so he had to go down there to the morgue. It was just some other person. But they kept doing things like that, trying to say that I was dead and they got me and different things, just to drive them crazy back home. And it was rough when they went through it. But it's amazing to be out. You know, it's amazing once you got that part and was able to get out of there. You know, like Kelly said, so many of us are trying to rebuild our lives. The last 4 years, we lost just about everything. Luckily, we had a good thing, and we didn't lose as much as some of them did. But I was a kid, some guys, they lost absolutely everything. They lost their lives, they lost their homes, their kids didn't want nothing to do with them. And you know, when you got your partner, you were out, but there wasn't much to go back to. And I felt so bad for some of those guys. They're still trying to rebuild. You know, the fight's not over. And it takes stuff like this. It takes the men and women that come together with a core belief in the fight has to be local. You know, you have to get groups like this together to stand beside each other, to be vigilant, to watch over your own community, to watch over each other, to help each other. So when the government comes back, because they will, they test every generation and start picking one of you off or start fighting one of you. You know, y'all can come together and say, no, enough is enough. Y'all aren't going to just pick us off like we did January 6th. But that's what it takes. You know, rally beside each other, stand for something, truly believe it. And that's it.
Thanks, John. I'm going to bring up somebody that didn't get away. Glenn Brooks is local here. He is a Guruichian, I guess that's what you call yourself. But he's going to talk about his experience a little bit.
Thank you, Kelly. It's an honor and privilege to stand before you folks. Do we have any Bible readers here? Show of hands. I read something in the book of Nahum a while back, and it really kind of resonated with me with regards to the whole January 6th, and I'm sure everybody who's had a taste of that can relate. Nahum 3:6. I will cast abominable filth upon you, make you vile, and make you a spectacle. That's exactly what I feel like they've been. You can see a living shaking their head. July 29th, 2021, I'm sitting down to read my Bible, and there was a pounding at the door, and I opened the door emotionally or psychologically. I blocked out what I experienced when I opened the door, although I had a security camera over the front door. And 3 days after I got home, I watched the video, and there was a team of about 12 or 15 SWAT tactical FBI people with a riot shield and a battering ram, and so I blocked that out somehow. And I am actually in therapy now, PTSD. A few days ago, I was attending my mom's memorial service who passed away as I was sitting in the Jessup, Georgia low security prison. And my sisters called me and said that they had been attending to my 92-year-old mom who was hanging on for life until I could get there to say goodbye. And my sister said, you know, the prisoner's not going to let you out, so we need you to tell Mom it's okay to let go. And I was like, I can't do that. But I ended up finding somehow to do that. Anyway, a few days ago, I was at the memorial service, and there was a sheriff's car there that was lingering with the funeral procession that was going to drive through town to a graveside. And I just started coming through, sitting there, wondering if as soon as the procession started, the sheriff was going to pull me out, which is kind of a situation that I think a lot of us are going through. But this document here is something that I drafted in prison, and I had been sending this out to the legal counsel that I had, asking the legal counsel to refuse the pardon that I figured was going to happen from our great President Donald Trump. Because the problem is, if you're innocent of the crime and you file an appeal to fight it, the pardon kills that. And so I wrote this document to ask the president to alter his pardon to a commutation, which would then preserve the appeal. You know, I expected a lot of reckless disregard by the Biden DOJ. I expected our present administration or Department of Justice to be a lot more forthcoming and helping the J6 people, but I'm finding that's actually not the case. Of course, somebody as insignificant as me doesn't have a voice to get my message, my question, into the right people in the administration. And I keep trying. I've reached out to our Congressperson Paradopoulos. He's proven to be utterly worthless to me, and is actually, his staff have told me things that is blatantly untrue about his inability, their inability to reach into the Department of Justice and try and raise my cause there. So I'm hoping that I can perhaps persuade Congressman's office, maybe they want to reconsider that position. In any event, I lost my family. As was mentioned here earlier, John and Olivia, you know, they make a spectacle out of arresting people. You maybe have heard this thing called an elephant walk, where they get all the jets on the tarmac and they roll 8 or 10, 15 jets down the street as a show of force. Well, they dragged my wife and 2 of my daughters, 25 and 17, out of bed in pajamas, out onto the street. They elephant walked us all to humiliate us in front of all of our neighbors. And one neighbor said it looked like a war zone. He was on CBS News. And, you know, it just was too much for my wife, so she filed for divorce. I lost my dad while I was going through the court thing. He was 96, my mom was 92, I lost her. And I am hopeful, confident, like everybody who's been through this, that given time, we have to be patient. What's his name there in the Oval Office? He's got a lot of stuff on his plate, so I don't begrudge it. I'm expecting more of the Department of Justice stuff. And I just, you know, keep praying about it. I was going to tell you, as soon as I stepped out of the door with all of the SWAT tactical machine guns and all that, I don't know what I was experiencing, but I think it was about 5 seconds after I got out of the door and I was confronted with whatever that was. I was standing there being frisked for weapons, I guess, and God spoke to me in my ear. He goes, "Glenn, this is a good time to pray." And I went, "That's right. That's my identity. My identity is in Christ. And all the fear, all the panic, all the chaos it all just completely evaporated. And in that moment, I realized that I was now on mission to be the face of Christ to all of these SWAT tactical guys, and I didn't know how long that was going to last. It's been, going on 4 years now that I've been on mission, and this is part of my mission testimony. I think that there were, I estimated 17 million people at the Capitol for the Stop the Steal event, January 6, 2021. As I throw that number out, nobody's ever contradicted it. So I'm going with 17 million people. I went into the Capitol expecting that God hopefully would have been showing his fingerprints to do something to correct what we seemed to have been a stolen election back in 2020. And so I wasn't there to demonstrate or protest or break anything. I actually got to the Capitol about an hour after the broadcast really first started. It was so cold and we were packed together so closely that after standing there for 3 hours, my feet were just killing me. So I went and sat down in the chair I had been carrying with me. And it wasn't until I was hearing what I guess were flash grenades that you experienced far more closely. I just want to say, I'm fascinated with listening to these other stories. I probably came up on 4 or 5 different J6 people in the 4 months that I did spend in prison. I was one of the people that got let loose out of prison that night. But it was really quite an ordeal. And I was hoping to have witnessed something that day at the Capitol, that God was doing something to manifest his presence, to stand up for the righteousness that we're all looking for. I don't think I could look back and see God's fingerprints the way I was hoping to have seen them that day. But it may very well be that we're going to see God's fingerprints all over that day in the years to come.
Thanks, Lynn. Now we're going to bring up Barry Ramey. I know he's spoken to a lot of people before, but he's got some stuff he wants to talk to you about again. I was in Lewisburg with him, so we hadn't seen each other in a while.
Okay. Hey, last week was a couple weeks ago, I was here. I had the privilege of speaking to most of your club. Thank you again for having me. If you want to hear about my personal story and FBI lying, saying I threatened them 14 times, they moved me to 16 prisons all over the United States, 3 years in federal prison, being stabbed in the face, and jailhouse brawls, and all that exciting stuff. Come see me again down here on our website. You can go look it up on yourself. Because right now I'm going to take a moment to possibly begin the beginning of our mission now that we're all out of prison. Now that January 6th has been exposed for the Fedsurrection that it was. How many of you are heard of the Patriot Act? Raise your hand. The Patriot Act. Any of you guys fans of it? It is by far one of the most unconstitutional pieces of legislation ever passed in the history of this country. And it completely contradicts the founding documents that this great nation stands upon, known as our Constitution. It takes your Fourth Amendment right, your right to not live in fear of illegal searches and seizures. If there's any kids in the room, pardon my French, but it wipes its ass with it and it throws it away. And every single January 6er in here has been a victim of it. And you, in this moment, right now, are a victim of it. We were labeled as domestic terrorists because an administration, unelected by the American people, decided we were domestic terrorists because we supported his greatest threat, Donald J. Trump. Me, her, him, Joanne, all of you. All of you have been put on some kind of list. Your phone, your banking information is all being watched legally Patriot Act because you support Donald Trump. While we were in prison, we were labeled as domestic terrorists. It was the first time in my entire life I'd ever had or ever felt or experienced what a broken heart felt like. Growing up, I had girls break up with me and thought, listening to New Kids on the Block at the skating rink, cleared that up on weekend with the boys. But a broken heart hurts. And when the Department of Justice and the American government, at your pre-trial release or any point in the trial, looks at you and points and says, that's a domestic terrorist. If you love this country, it will break your heart. I promise you. It was the first time that it really hurt inside much, and it's like a bull was sitting on it. And the reason they were able to do that was because of the Patriot Act. I was in a low prison finally when I was sentenced to my destination to serve my time. I was sentenced to 5 years after refusing to sign a plea for 20 years and winning going to trial and winning and being the two most serious charges against me. But I was still sentenced to 5 years in prison. And when I got to FCI Miami, I was informed that I was labeled as a terrorist in the Bureau of Prisons, which I will now refer to as the BOP. And the BOP, through the DOJ and Eric Garland's office, they received a phone call that all people involved, charged, and convicted of January 6th related crimes will be labeled as greatest severity. Pretty much means you're a domestic terrorist. The DOJ never in the history of the Bureau of Prisons, the BOP, has ever interfered with their classification and labeling process. How do I know this? Because it got so bad in my prison with the taunting and harassment of not just me, but my family who weren't even involved in January 6th, that the case manager, whose husband was retired from the Bureau of Prisons of 25 years, had told her this had never happened. Never once has the DOJ called the Bureau of Prisons, not even with an Islamic terrorist, it said classify them as domestic terrorists. The BOP does that all on their own through a little place called Grand Prairie in Texas. Never once again has the DOJ interfered with that process, but they did with us. In my federal prison where I was at, there was an individual that was ex-IDF, Israeli Defense Force. He went rogue and was selling weapons to Hamas. This is back in the early 2000s. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Those weapons were used in an elementary school shooting where children were massacred. He wasn't labeled as the greatest severity domestic terrorist. There was an individual with ISIS that helped. He was from Arkansas, he was an American citizen, flew over to Syria, joined ISIS, shot at our troops, killed one. He wasn't labeled as a domestic terrorist in the Bureau of Prisons. Actual terrorists weren't labeled that, but we were. And when the Bureau of Prisons labels you that, they have something called the counterterrorism unit that monitors everything you do, from your mail to your phone calls, your movements in the yard. They screen video footage from the prison, all at the dime of the taxpayers. You guys paid for it. You didn't ask you. They just said, we don't like these people, so they're terrorists. Now you're going to pay for the surveillance on them. They moved us in a process called easy therapy from prison to prison to prison, all before trial, making the process the punishment. Again, I was moved 14 times to 16 different facilities. 16 times to 14 facilities, excuse me. All in the course before trial. I hadn't been convicted yet. They shackled, they cuffed me, they put me on buses, they put me on planes everywhere from Oklahoma to Tallahassee, back to Atlanta, to Virginia, to Pennsylvania, to Washington, D.C., back to Virginia, back to Atlanta, just to torture me. And you're paying for that. When the Bureau of Prisons or the Marshals, the federal government, the DOJ, move an inmate or somebody pending trial, it costs $2,000 to $10,000 U.S. tax dollars to do so. $2,000 to $10,000, depending on how long the trip, how many people are involved, and how many guards are putting on that. You're paying for that. Also, the DOJ can break somebody down and get them to take a plea, keeping their 98.7% conviction rating all at the dime of the U.S. tax dollar. The good and the God fingerprint that we're going to find all over January 6th is actually going to be the punishment. What we went and we experienced, there are communities all across America, urban communities, poor communities, other communities, American communities that have been saying for years that the Department of Justice and the prison system is corrupt. And I know I can speak for myself. I wasn't listening. Well, I am now. We are millions of dollars, billions of dollars of your money and telling you they have programs to rehabilitate these individuals and these programs don't exist. We've been paying for them for years. They don't even offer them. So, in conclusion, what Glenn was saying about God's fingerprint, this is what we need to start looking for. And we need to take this situation and never allow it to happen again. We cannot allow the Department of Justice to be weaponized against the political ideology in this country ever again. What we watched them do to Donald J. Trump with the lawfare and the witch hunt and all this stuff that they're still going to try to do is just one midterm election away from happening again. I know that I am preaching to the choir. I'm not talking to the individuals in here because if you took time out of your week on a Wednesday to come to an event like this, you obviously care about the politics in your country. But your neighbors, your friends, your family. Conservatives, we have a history of not showing up to the front. While these liberals, these communists will walk on broken shards of glass and lakes on fire to vote for whatever rainbow hair-colored school board member with 22 lip rings, 14 cats, and 1 litter box in the kitchen that wants to call your son Daniel Danielle. They will go vote for them in the middle of the night in a hurricane. But conservatives, too busy. Sports game. Something else is going on. And look where we're at today. And we have nobody but we the people to blame. So I want to encourage everybody to start to pay attention to the Patriot Act. This is a piece of legislation that has got to go for the sanctity of the American people and what our country represents. So pay attention where it shows up. AT&T turning all of our information over to the FBI without even a warrant or even being asked. It's against the Constitution. They were allowed to do that because of the Patriot Act.
Bank of America.
Yeah, our banking institutions turning our information over to the FBI without even being asked. It's against the Constitution, but okay with the Patriot Act. So, in conclusion, again, I want to thank you guys for giving us an opportunity. There is so much stuff that needs to be told to you guys about what actually happened to us behind jail that you can give us 3 or 4 hours each and it still wouldn't be able to paint a picture for you to understand. Although I think being in a prison cell may be a little better than this one. I don't know. But ladies and gentlemen, we've been through hell and back. Our stories are still being told. If you want to hear anything about my personal plight, I got some literature on me. I can give you my website. Thanks for having me. Kelly, thanks for putting this together, brother. Sandra.
Thanks, Greg. You know, Barry told me he was going to talk about the weaponization, and I'm like, man, that's what I was going to talk about. But I always had a belief that no matter how hard the government came at me, it's okay because eventually I'm going to get to see the judge, and I'm going to be able to present evidence, and I'm going to actually be able to show them that I'm innocent. Now, as a member of the Oath Keepers, we went to January 6th for one reason only. Yes, the election was stolen. I hate that conversation because everybody has that conversation the wrong way. I can prove the election was stolen for 3 things, and it has nothing to do with ballots or software or anything else. Russia collusion hoax went on for 2.5 years. They said that the president was involved with Russia. That's lies. We know it's lies. The reports are out. Everybody's read them, and that's the truth. The second thing was the 51 intelligence officers that signed off that Hunter Biden's laptop was a lie. That is election fraud. Okay? It has nothing to do with ballots. It has nothing to do with the computer software. It's just the fake news spreading a narrative that everybody seems to want to listen to. And then the third thing that they did was the $400 million that Facebook gave them in free advertising, which is illegal. And nothing's being done about any of those things. That is where we are at, folks. Let me tell you something. Everything that Barry said is 100% true. everything that everybody here has gone through is because of the Patriot Act. But here's the problem. It's not being fixed. I am not part of it. I am commuted.
Ken is the leader.
I was commuted. Kenny was commuted. There's 13 of us that are not commuted. And it's all the people that had seditious conspiracy. I'm going to give you a 5-minute brief on what happened to me in the Capitol. Walked up near the door, sang the national anthem. The doors open. We got pushed in. We found a cop who was trapped in a corner, surrounded by people. We pushed the people away from the officer. The officer stood behind us. We held the crowd away from him so nobody was attacking him. We calmed down the situation. His backup arrived. The dude fist bumped me. We left. We walked to the front door trying to get out, and no one was going out because there was too many people coming in. 3 officers standing over to the side. I walked over to the side. I said, hey, we need to get people out of this building because there's people trying to get out and people trying to come in. You guys got to do something. So we can't do anything. I said, look, I can do something. And he goes, go right ahead. So I stood in front of the door and I yelled and I made everybody stop coming in. And I stood here for 6 minutes on camera, getting people out of the building, talking to the police the whole time. The female officer who was next to the officer I was talking to leaned in and asked me if it was okay if she went to the bathroom. I said, I don't care. She went to the bathroom. Okay? Get people out of the building. As soon as we got everybody out of the building, the officer fist bumps me. He's like, thanks, man. I'm like, I'm out of here. We walked out the door. That was my experience in the Capitol. I knew if I showed that video in court, I would go free. So I said, I'm going to fight it. Wasn't interested in a plea deal. Now, they made me an offer. They made my wife an offer. My wife's offer was divorce your husband and testify against him and we'll make all of this go away. 100% truth. 100% truth. My offer was to say that a phone call occurred and that something was said on that phone call that was never said. And I said, listen, I'm not hiding anything. I will tell you everything that actually happened. But that never happened. And they said, apparently, you don't want us to your family. And I said, but I can't look at myself in the mirror if I do that. I can't. So for 4 years, I didn't see my family. I had a granddaughter that was born while I was in prison. I finally got to see her at the shade lunch. That was kind of cool. Thank you, President Trump. But I will add a note to that. I only got to see her for 1 day because they're in custody of the state of Florida until 2 weeks ago. They took my grandchildren while I was away. My daughter has a medical condition. She had an episode. My wife was not there to do backup because my wife was in prison. We were both in prison. I didn't talk to my wife for over a year. And the people who had our children, grandchildren, would not give them back to my daughter because she didn't have the support network. So they put her into foster homes. They put 3 of my grandkids in the foster homes. And things started changing in January, though. My attorney was chief of staff on the transition team for President Trump. So I had a little bit of access to things that maybe most people didn't. And I texted him and told him the story, and he said, let me see what I can do. And I don't know if he had anything to do with it. I really don't. I assume maybe. But the caseworker was fired. They told my wife she had mental problems because she was a January 6th, and that they didn't trust her with children. And ultimately, they forced her to present her pardon with the actual signature on it before they would bring the kids back to the house. So, but then I got out and nobody said anything, so I'm kind of confused on how that works. But long story short, the kids are back, so that's the good news. That's really awesome. But the justice system, the weaponization of our government, the use of the Patriot Act, there is no protection. There is no protection. Because I'm telling you right now, we had video evidence. We said, we got videos, this is going to prove that we're innocent. Except for one problem. Well, that part of the Capitol doesn't have cameras. It's not possible. It's directly in front of the Speaker's lobby, where the Speaker of the House is working. It's there. It has to be there, right? We found a journalist who was walking through the building. He videoed for 2.5 hours. There was only 5 minutes missing from his video. And that's when he walked by us and stopped. And the screen went black. The screen came back on, and he was in another part of the building. My attorney said, well, obviously he turned his camera on. So I'm like, no, that's not how it works. The video runs constantly. It just blacks out for 5 minutes. That's when he saw us. They doctored the evidence in my trial. We had 2 officers lie on the stand in our trial. They changed their FBI 302. The FBI 302 is if I come to you and I interview you and I ask you questions about a crime, you're doing an FBI 302, whether you know it or not, right? He said, we helped him. He goes, they helped me, they kept the crowd away from me, and everything was fine. That was his first 302. His second 302 was, well, I didn't say they could stand there, but they did. Their third one, and what he testified to in trial, was we were trying to push him out of the way so that we could get down the stairs and assault him, which is not true. So, not only did he lie on the stand, they knew that the videos were out there that could prove some of the innocence for us. So they brought in a second officer, David Lazarus, who testified that he witnessed this entire event happen and that we were verbally assaulting and trying to get by Harry and I. Okay? David Lazarus was in a different building. And when we discovered this, we tried to call him back in to re-testify so that we had no idea who David Lazarus was. When you're in trial, you don't know until the day before that this guy's coming to testify against you. And when they told me David Lazarus, I had no idea who that was. Well, guess what? When I figured out who it was, I actually saw him. I went back to the unit that night, and we had a little tablet. You go through the videos on. I went through the videos, I found him, and I seen him leave the building before we ever got there and not come back until after. So I had evidence that he was not there. We went into court the next day, and we said, we have new evidence we want to bring. We want to recall David Lazarus. The United States government said that is not possible. He is not available. Probably won't be back until after the trial's over. And the judge said, if you think I'm going to let you defame and call a Capitol policeman a liar after what you guys put him through, that's not going to happen in my courtroom. So justice isn't there. And I'm telling you right now, all the things that you've heard everybody talk about in here today, it's all still there. All of it. Everything that's been used against us, everything that's happened in our court systems, everything that's happened with the FBI, all those things are still going on right now. And I'm telling you, we have to demand change. And it happens not only when we vote, but we have to put pressure on the people that are in office now. We have an America First agenda. We voted for that. That's what we want. It's common sense, right? I mean, that's what it is, really. But honestly, the people running this country do not care. They do not care. I'm not necessarily talking about Donald Trump, but I'm talking about a lot of people that are around him. So we have to be very careful about who we talk about. But I want to explain something to you. How much money has Doge uncovered so far? Trillions of dollars, right? How many arrests? 0. You know why? Because they're politicians. Right? We know they're stealing. They're stealing. And nobody's doing anything about it. We have to hold Cash Patel, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, we have to hold them accountable. We cannot allow this to continue under our watch. This is our administration, and we have to get these things fixed now. And the best way you can do that is just like Barry said. Everybody in this room has some level of activism in you because you're here. Right? You could be home watching TV like 99% of the world, right? But you chose to come out. You chose out to support us, which we greatly appreciate. But at the same time, you have a circle of influence. You have the ability to tell people these stories. And you can talk about election fraud. Guess what? Those 3 things I mentioned about election fraud are proven fact. There's plenty of articles online you can show your friends and neighbors, whoever wants to listen to you. You don't have to get into some crazy software and the formula and all these different things. You don't have to get into that. It happened too. I mean, let's be honest, right? But you can stick to those 3 basic facts and prove your election fraud right there. And let me tell you something. If that 2020 election was stolen, like everybody in this room believes, I'm not seditious conspiracy. Right? I was stopping a seditious conspiracy. And that's the truth. Everybody there was January 6th because there was a stolen election in our country. And all the time, when people would tell me, if I didn't have to work that day, man, I would have been there. Guess what? I had to work that day. Okay? Had a pretty good job. I ran car dealerships, so I was a general manager of the dealerships. Okay? But I had an understanding boss, and I told him, look, some things have to be done. I didn't realize it was going to be 4 years later when I talked to him again, but that's what it ended up being. But long story short, guys, you have to become more active. You have to do things. You have to help your community understand what's happened to you, and what's happened to us, and what's happening to our country. Because guess what? I'm telling you right now, Donald Trump was in office when people started getting arrested on January 6th. You have to remember that. All it takes is one election that turns, and this is all over. So we need to get the things done now. We need to get them done fast, like he's trying to do. We need to let him know we support him. We need to let him know that we expect more out of the FBI, the DOJ, and all of them. We have to demand that because we're in charge. We the people. Right? I'm going to enjoy that. Make sure you support Angel by buying her stuff. I've got books over here. We will take credit cards. Whatever you got to do, we'll sign your books. We're going to do what we can. Okay? I'll turn it back over to George.
Appreciate it. There's a lot of word about intervention about God. I want everybody to take out their phones and go to Google and go to Ephesians 6:11. That's the exact time that President Trump was shot at. On 6/11, 33 seconds. And it says on Ephesians 6:11, put the armor of God upon you to protect yourself from evil. Did everybody know that one? You know, as we talk about things that are going on here about intervention and stuff. Ashley Babbitt was denied military merit. Yes, it was. And you know what? You can trust the government like the American Indians did because they trusted the United States government. And about what Kelly said, and also our brother there, it means a lot about that paper there. So we have to call our politicians up and tell them they're all slowing down, they have a responsibility. And the intervention was that day when President Trump, the assassination attempt, was on 6, the time was exactly 6:11. Okay? And that means God chose this man to save us. It's very important that J6 is needs financial support. jobs, vehicles, affordable housing, mental health support. Give them a call. Don't expect them to call you. Call them up, get their names and numbers, and give them the support that they need. Medical insurance, they've been denied, and help them with their family. It's very important that we support them. Okay, and we've been going on, nothing great about me, but it took me 5 hours to get here. Okay? You know, so these things are important to me and should be important to everybody else. Just because President Trump won doesn't mean this shit is over. Okay? And everybody's got to go to these rallies. You know, we go to these Tesla rallies and all this other stuff. We get 1,250 people outside. They busted in 150. People say, oh, we shouldn't go there. There's no reason to go there. Yes, there is a reason to go. We have to show how powerful we are with numbers. It doesn't matter. Because everybody likes to sit home. Keyboard warriors, some of them are good, but most of them, you can't hit anybody with a keyboard. It ain't gonna happen. And we gotta stop being in defense and being on the offense. All right? We have a constitution to defend. We are a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Okay? And that's what we have to remember. We have to get the Constitution. A lot of these people took an oath on the Constitution, all the veterans did, to fight for that Constitution. And we can defeat it to those assholes that are out there protesting Tesla, blowing up their cars that they really agree with. And they're talking about Social Security. And the 300-year-old person that got Social Security, it's a great help plan. Now, one more thing I want to say very quick. You know why the reason President Trump used the number 115-year-old? And it was because we still have a woman in America still alive at 114 years old. So he checks everything. Dives, peas, stuff like that. Okay, and also, he loves number 45. That's what we're saying. And I'll tell you why. When he spoke in front of Congress, how many days were it? 45 days. So, and pay attention when he speaks. Don't go on your phone and tell, oh, I did what he said. Everybody got the phone. Did you hear what Trump said? No, pay attention to what he said. When he finishes the conversation, then you take notes. God bless everybody. Thank you. And God bless our dear citizens. There were total of 5 people that died at the Capitol. And also, 2 committed suicide because they didn't want to go to trial. So people have to come on.
Thank you, George. So I'm talking about mental health. I am going to introduce someone for a few minutes and then we're going to close out. Hey, Eddie, how are you? That was my husband back there. Dr. Phil Tafina, International Brain Health Foundation, Save a Soldier, and he does things with PTSD. So he's going to just introduce himself for a few minutes and talk to everyone in the audience. Thank you. Dr. Tafina.
Thank you, Sandra, for inviting me this evening. It was worth a several-hour trip here. I want to thank and God bless all the good Americans here who spoke. And it was just an incredible experience that you guys have had. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I'm going to try to be brief here. I've been here for a long time. But as I'm a neuropsychologist, clinical psychologist by training. You can tell from my funny accent, I'm from New York. I did my internship in psychology at NYU Bellevue Hospital, which many of you may have heard of. So I dealt with a lot of serious psychiatric problems. We had the men's psychiatric prison unit at Bellevue. We had the female psychiatric prison unit at Elmhurst Hospital. I was the psychologist at both units over 8 years. Before I went into the regular army, I was in the reserves and worked in military intelligence for the army. Our mission was to work against terrorists against the United States of America, and we went overseas and did that job. Our mission was never to work against American citizens, and especially with the United States Army. Abraham Lincoln set the Posse Comitatus Act, which basically says that the U.S. military did no war against citizens for fear that the military would take over the nation. So our mission was to really work against bad guys. And it was, very disconcerting with that background to see the things that have evolved and happened. I'm going to tell you a very brief story, which I think is relevant. There's so many thoughts went through my mind listening to the brave men and women talking today. When I left the military, I was in the Special Operations Command that was very secretive. They debriefed me for several weeks before I left, then went back to the civilian community, and it was all over. You have to erase that part of your life. Well, something very interesting happened. I got a job back at Hanoi Medical Center as a neuropsych doc, and I was asked the first day on the job by the chairman of the department, can you go to Switzerland later in the week to do a lecture on a topic area that I wanted to speak about? I said, okay, but I don't have my passport. So what do you mean no passport? So I was in the military, and I had a military passport that was used. I had a brown, like a Christian business passport. So I said, okay, let me go get my passport. Well, I went to the passport office, and the passport office used to be at one location, and it changed. That location was 26 Federal Plaza. It was where the federal government building is in New York City that houses the FBI, the CIA, etc. So I walked to the part of the building where government people go to the building and realized that, oh, I have to go around to the other end. Well, when I go inside, I had my military passport and ID that I put through for the federal security to look through as I'm walking through the metal detector. And what was in my brown passport was my ID from Special Ops. That ID had a picture of me, no designated agency. It had some statistical information, and basically on the back it said, if anyone finds this card, this official government ID, put it in the closest mailbox, otherwise you'll be charged under 18 U.S. code, blah, blah, blah. But there was no agency. So they said to me, is this your card? I said, yes. This is not an official government card. I said, yes, it is. They said, what agency? I said, I can't discuss it. Well, I was arrested by Homeland Security in that building, and the FBI detained for 18 hours. So it just brings to mind a few things I just want to say to you. During that 18-hour period, it was very interesting, because I went to SEER school, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape, and Special Ops, and I was keeping my mouth shut, and I wasn't cooperating. I had a little daughter at home. I was a single parent in New Jersey during this whole episode that I wasn't in contact with. And essentially, they tried to fingerprint me twice, Homeland Security and the FBI, and it came back no hit because my fingerprints were removed because of my job previously. So it got very interesting. But during that time period, I refused to speak to them. Eventually, they said, we're taking you over to the federal courthouse, which is 3 blocks away, during rush hour. And it took them too long to get there because the federal judge left. So they handcuffed me. They put lead irons on me. And all these people taking me with several cars because I was called a terrorist. When I was sitting in this glass jail cell, they have these glass cells in this building, there were a lot of other people that were in other cells that were dressed a lot differently from me, Middle Easterners, and me. So basically, they were talking about this terrorist they had, and eventually, it was me that they were discussing, that I was a high priority person, and blah, blah, blah. I had a joint discussion with CIA, FBI, and Homeland Security, and they said, if you're not clean with us, you're going to be in Guantanamo Bay in 24 hours. I said, let me explain something. I said, let's say I work for a federal agency that you're not supposed to know anything about. If you can find out about it, that's great. If you think I'm a terrorist, I said, well, you have to find out about that too. I said, but we're going to be sitting here for a long time. Eventually, I will leave. And they just said, all right, you want to be a wise guy? We go to the federal court. The judge left. They brought me to the federal detention center in Brooklyn. By the time we got to the federal detention center, calls were made in Washington to different agencies, and eventually they tracked down someone with the Defense Intelligence Agency that eventually realized that I was in a prison situation. They wanted to understand why I was being held as a terrorist. And they said, no, he belongs to an organization, that you don't need to know about. Get him out tonight, now. And then the same people came to get me. They were very quiet, the same abusive, federal agents that I dealt with earlier. Didn't know what to say. Drove me back, got my stuff and left. That was a very interesting experience. So I was listening to all the things that you guys have gone through for such a long period of time that created so many problems for yourself emotionally, for your parents, your sons, your daughters, your wives, the difficulties you have with families. It's heartbreaking. It's terrible. And that causes post-traumatic stress. And it causes a lot of issues. You guys are brave, you went through a lot. But it creates a lot of difficulty emotionally, financially, etc. So I'm here tonight to talk to you because I have a program. It's called Save a Soldier program, where I've treated over 400 veterans, POWs, other individuals from Special Operations Command, Navy SEALs, U.S. Army Delta, Green Berets, etc. I treat them for free. I have a foundation. It runs about $25,000 a month. They're there 6.5 hours a day, 5 days a week for a month. And when they come in, they're in bad shape. When they leave, they're in excellent shape. We do videotapes, and we have good supporters. So I raise money for my foundation because I don't want one veteran to pay for what they've gone through, and I want to be there to help them and save their lives. And I would like to do the same thing for people in this room. We have an organization with a center in Virginia and one here in Florida. We have a program. Where in Florida? We're on the campus of Delray Hospital in Florida. We're on the campus of Reston Hospital in Virginia. It's not far from the Capitol. And I have experts that work for me for traumatic brain injury, for post-traumatic stress, and for toxic exposure that affects brain functioning as well. And we have an excellent program that modifies electrical, magnetic, chemical activity in your brain. You use hyperbaric oxygen, you use different kinds of electrical magnetic stimulation, very advanced research protocols for PTSD and PPI. And the veterans that I work with and treat, they're all in the Special Operations community, went through the DoD program, they went through the VA programs, and they weren't doing well. Because medication is not the answer. And more medication is not the answer.